The Caspian Sea is vanishing in plain sight. Each year, satellites capture its shoreline retreating like a wound that won't heal. Just as the region braces for irreversible loss, a startling move emerges. Russia and Kazakhstan have launched the most ambitious hydraulic project in modern Eurasian history, a plan to give the ancient landlocked Caspian an outlet to the open ocean. But why would two nations remake coastlines, redirect rivers, and carve a path outward for a dying sea? Why answer disappearance with an engineered escape?
On June 15, 2007, at the 17th Foreign Investors Council meeting in Astana, Nazarbayev of Kazakhstan unveiled a bold vision, the Eurasia Canal, a project to link the Caspian Sea with the Black Sea, estimated to cost $6 billion and take a decade to complete. The canal would stretch nearly 700 kilometers, 4 times the length of the Suez Canal and 8 times that of the Panama Canal. If realized, it would become the second longest canal on Earth. But while the scale is breathtaking, the reason for its existence is something more terrifying. The Caspian itself is vanishing. The Caspian Sea, the world's largest inland body of water, has been shrinking for decades. Since 1995, its water level has steadily declined, dropping nearly 2 meters between 2006 and 2024. As of today, it rests at its lowest recorded level, 29 meters below sea level. But there is no hope that it will get better. Instead, music. Scientists warn that by the end of the 21st century, the sea could fall another 9 to 18 meters, potentially losing a quarter of its total area. The shallow northeastern sector along Kazakhstan's coast will be the first to suffer, home to fragile ecosystems, villages, ports, and the region's densest hydrocarbon reserves. But why is the sea disappearing? The causes are many. Regulation of river inflows, desalination projects, hydrocarbon contamination, but the primary driver is climate change. Unlike open oceans, the Caspian is a closed system. Its rivers cannot compensate for the accelerating evaporation. Between 1979 and 2015, average air temperatures over the sea rose by about 1 degree Celsius, while changing wind patterns intensified water loss. The Volga and other inflowing rivers are under constant pressure from agriculture, industry, and urban use upstream. In effect, the sea is being drained. However, human activity seems to make matters worse. The northeastern Caspian contains the largest concentration of both offshore and onshore oil and gas reserves. In 2013, Kazakhstan's sector held 31 billion barrels of oil out of 48 billion total, and 104 trillion cubic feet of natural gas out of 292 trillion total. Major projects, including the Tangus-Chevroil onshore field and the offshore Kashagan field, have caused environmental damage, often unpunished due to weak enforcement of national laws and international protocols under the Tehran Convention. Violations result in greenhouse gas emissions, further accelerating water loss. Shipping is another significant factor. In 2012, emissions from maritime traffic accounted for 2.2% of global anthropogenic carbon dioxide.
The two main northeastern ports, Aktau and Kurik, handle 15 million tons of oil annually. Between 2013 and 2022, 15 oil spills were officially recorded. However, independent studies suggest the actual number may be as high as 329, primarily from ballast water and waste discharges. Yet it doesn't look like the spills would reduce since cargo volume along the Trans-Caspian international transport route has surged in recent years, and the World Bank estimates container transport demand alone by 2030 could reach 4 million tons, thus further increasing emissions and evaporation rates. Due to all these reasons, the sea has been so affected that it is now evident on the map. Between 2001 and 2022, the northeastern Caspian lost 39% of its surface area, while the shoreline retreated more than 37 kilometers. If the sea drops another 10 meters, settlements could be nearly 90 kilometers from the water's edge. The Eurasia Canal is a direct response to this crisis. Advocates present it as economic liberation for Kazakhstan, providing a sovereign maritime route for oil, gas, and music, grain. For Russia, it offers strategic leverage over regional trade, potentially countering China's Belt and Road Initiative. The canal would likely follow the Manich River and Kumamonic Depression, utilizing existing lakes, reservoirs, and shallow canals. It would create a permanent waterway across thousands of kilometers of steppe, reshaping both geography and geopolitics. Yet, the canal is not a neutral solution. To operate, it would siphon immense volumes of water from an already shrinking Caspian or its tributaries, potentially worsening the decline it is meant to solve. It would connect distinct ecosystems, risking the introduction of invasive species and further ecological instability. In the end, the crisis and the solution are intertwined, locked in a spiral where human ambition accelerates environmental collapse, even as it promises control and opportunity. And in that spiral, the Caspian becomes the perfect anchor for the broader narrative. Its shrinking shoreline exposes not only a regional ecological emergency, but the return of an older imperial logic, one that sees rivers, seas, and basins not as ecosystems to be preserved, but as hydraulic instruments of power. To understand how far this mindset extends, one must turn to the earlier, even grander Soviet schemes that once aimed to reshape entire continents.
Over more than 30 years, the Soviet state planned, designed, and even began the construction of projects meant to bend the very geography of the continent to human will. The Obish and the Yenisei rivers, that for millennia had carried fresh water north to the Arctic Ocean, were seen as wasting their bounty. Meanwhile, 1,500 kilometers to the south, the deserts of Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, and Turkmenistan were being transformed into irrigated cotton fields, a crop the state called white gold. The solution, in the cold logic of Stalinist and Brezhnev-era planning, was simple in its music brutality: capture the water and force it south uphill to serve the economy. The Siberian River Reversal Project became the hydraulic expression of that ideology. Engineers like M.M. David imagined a Siberian Sea, a vast reservoir on the Ob River. From there, a canal wider and deeper than the Suez would pump water south across the Turai Depression into the Sir Darya Basin. Later plans grew even more grandiose, drawing in the Yenisei and proposing a vast network of canals and pumping stations, an earth-moving operation without precedent. The aim was total subjugation of nature. Water was to become a commodity no different from coal or iron ore. That it supported entire ecosystems was irrelevant. Had even a fraction of the project been completed, the consequences would have been catastrophic. Scientists inside and outside the USSR began to model the potential effects in the 1970s and 80s. Fresh water from the Siberian rivers drives global thermohaline circulation. Diverting it could have weakened currents like the Gulf Stream, cooling Europe. Western Siberia's petlands, the largest carbon sink on Earth, would have been drained, releasing methane and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. Canals crossing the steppe would evaporate much of their water before reaching Central Asia. The project represented the ultimate confidence in human power, a belief that enough concrete, dynamite, and political will could rewrite a continent. The plan failed not because of environmental concerns, but because of cost and chaos. The hundreds of billions of rubles required, coupled with the economic and political collapse of the late Soviet period, made it impossible. It was, in 1986, a casualty of perestroika. Yet the idea never died. It retreated into strategic thought, a ghost of ambition waiting for the right moment. In 2025, that ghost returned. The Russian Academy of Sciences launched studies into a modernized version of the Siberian Water Diversion Project. Unlike the Soviet-era canals, the new model favors closed pipelines to reduce evaporation and salinity. It is framed not for cotton, but as a national security measure to water the southern regions of Russia. The mindset behind the original project has found even more immediate use since the full-scale invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Russian engineers have publicly suggested diverting water from northern and central rivers, the Don, the Volga, to supply occupied Crimea and the war-ravaged Donbass.
Hydraulic power has become a weapon. The same logic that once sought to make the Obi flow backwards now drives strategies for territorial control, integration, and coercion.